Hey friends, I wanted to take a moment to tell you about my new book, Negotiation Made Simple. For the past 20 years, I have helped business people put together important deals, lawyers settle big lawsuits, small business owners grow their business by getting the most value for their product possible. And through this, I've learned a process on how to use negotiation to deliver outstanding deals. This particular book is those 20 years and everything I've learned about negotiation that's packaged in a very practical guide for solving problems, building relationships, and delivering the next deal. I hope you will jump in, buy this book, read this book, put it to work, and in doing so, you will be equipped to get better negotiation outcomes and to get what you want, not only in business, but in life as well. Go purchase Negotiation Made Simple wherever you buy books and use 2024 as an opportunity to take your next step in your negotiation success. Welcome to Negotiation Made Simple, where we help you master the art of negotiation and win the next deal. I'm your host, John Lowry. We are moving through this series on salary negotiations, and I am sharing 3 secrets that I think are very significant to achieving what you want to achieve in a salary negotiation. I've kind of been blown away, honestly, in how many questions exist about salary negotiation. It's amazing to me how many people identify this as such a significant negotiation moment in their life. And so I wanted to provide as many resources as possible to be able to help you through this particular moment that is a consequential and significant moment in your career. This episode, I will share with you secret number 2. Secret number 1 was all about the process. This is about how we get the salary negotiation started, and then we'll follow with secret number 3 here in a couple of weeks. So let's jump into this episode as we tackle secret number 2 of our series on salary negotiation. If you recall, secret number 1 was all about the process, and it was understanding that the process begins long before the process actually begins. These secrets kind of build on each other, and so it's really important that we nail that first secret, that we understand it, that we take advantage of the moment that we have to set ourselves up to be successful in our salary negotiations. And to do so, we've got to prepare and we've got to make the conversation ripe. And what I mean by that is we've got to think about, when do we want to have this conversation? And when we think about when, it usually comes after we've been able to demonstrate success and we've been able to establish our value for the organization. And so many times that happens at the end of a project that has gone very, very well. Or maybe it's landing a huge deal, or maybe it's hitting the numbers for the year. Whatever the case might be, if it's a current role, even if it's moving to a different role, having that story of demonstrated success from which to build on is really, really important. And it sets the stage for secret number 2. Secret number 2 is about what we ask for. And the secret can be summed up into just 3 words, and that is ask for more. The reason why this secret is difficult for some is because here's the moment where things get uncomfortable. When you're asking for more, what I find is that many times people actually undervalue their work and they don't ask for enough. And so I've seen that so many times. I've experienced that in my own life to where I wanted to be a team player so badly. I wanted the potential employer to see me as someone that put the company first and would be a great asset to the company. And I got so caught up in that I didn't ask for enough. And as a result of that, I think I actually devalued myself in the eyes of the person that was hiring me. And so I don't want you to make that same mistake. And so to avoid that, it's important to ask for more. Now, we're going to talk about the limits to that because you can't go crazy. You'll look ridiculous. But at the same time, that's not the mistake that I see most often. The mistake that I see most often is that people will actually start negotiating with themselves before they ever even start a salary negotiation with a new employer or a current employer. And so what happens is we find ourselves in this conversation, in this negotiation that is happening between our ears, to where we begin to think about, well, I don't want them to say no. I don't want this whole thing to start combatively. I like where I work, or I really want this job. And so what we start doing is we start saying, well, I could live with that. And I'd be fine with this level of compensation. And I'd be good with this much PTO off. And we literally start negotiating away. And as a result, we come to the table, and when that question gets asked, well, what are your salary expectations? Or what do you have in mind as it relates to PTO, or whatever the case might be? We're not prepared for that moment. We're not courageous in that moment. And as a result, we end up asking for less. And so here's the moment where I want you to think about, how is it that we can avoid that conversation inside our own head to where we don't start making concessions until we need to make concessions. And I think what a lot of this has to do with is actually a lack of skill. And so what I want to share with you today, and what is the essence of this secret, is how to skillfully ask for more. And by skillfully, what I mean is I want to enhance your chance of getting more, but I also want to give you an out to where if more is not on the table, if more is not something that your employer or your future employer is willing to consider, you still find yourself in a very good place to be able to put that deal together for you to go to work, or for you to get that raise, or for you to get that promotion, whatever the case might be. So here's how you do it. The key is, when you ask for more, you want to do it softly. Now, by softly, what I mean is you don't want to make it like a take it or leave it. You don't want to make it to where you will walk away if you don't get this. Because what happens is, if whoever it is that you're negotiating with, if they sense that your expectations are just way out of line and there's no hope that they can put the deal together, then they may resign themselves from the fact that you are a next great employee at the company, or you're worthy of the promotion that they're considering you for. And you don't want to do that. And so the way to do it softly has to do with the actual words that you use. This is where you want to be very, very specific. And I love the example that one of my friends has given in this moment. My friend is a pastor of a church. And what my friend realized, he said, I wasn't smart enough, or I wasn't good enough to be able to come up with some of the conversations that I have to have with people. I wasn't good enough or smart enough to be able to manage those conversations on the fly. I had to get ahead of it. I had to prepare. And so what I did was I developed these kind of ways of doing these conversations. And what he was talking about was these horrific moments in people's lives where they would call him their pastor, and they would have to then reveal to him something that's happened in their life that they need help with. And so it could be that a marriage was ending, or it could be that there was a death in the family, or something like that. And they call with this news, they call asking for this help. And here it is to where, boom, they drop this bomb. And now all of a sudden, he has maybe a second or two to begin coming up with a response that will be helpful and will be healing and will add value to the situation. And what he realized was that was just really hard to do in a second or two. And he said, there were things that I said in response to people that looking back weren't that helpful, and I didn't want to do that. This is the same kind of moment that requires a level of preparation that is different from many moments. You want to be acutely aware of what you need to accomplish, and you want to know exactly how you are going to accomplish it. And so when we think about putting an offer on the table, or we think about making a demand for salary, this is the moment where we want to do it softly. That is the strategy, but we don't want to do it too softly. Too softly would say, well, I would like to make $100,000 a year to come and join your company and work in this position, but that's negotiable. Now notice, by me saying, but that's negotiable, that means that $100,000 is not really your number. Your number is actually something less than that. And so immediately the entire conversation is going to shift to, well, how much under $100,000 is real? And so $100,000, notice it's lost its influence. It doesn't have the kind of impact that you want it to have. It's not going to create that anchoring effect to where the whole conversation then revolves around $100,000. And the reason is because you made it too soft with this phrase of it's negotiable, or this big qualifier that you might put in there. And so instead, I'd like for you to consider doing something like this, to where you find some reason why that number is reasonable, but it's not necessarily a reason that has to apply in this particular case. So let me give you an example of what I mean. You may say something like, well, I've done a little bit of research and it seems that people that are applying for jobs or are in jobs at this level and in this role, that their salaries are about $100,000. Now, notice right there, it's soft because you've said the word about, and you haven't pointed to a specific position or a specific person. You've just kind of pointed generically to people in this role. And by doing that, what you have done is you have, in a sense, kind of given a ballpark of where you want to end and what your expectations are. Now, you've made that ballpark in the area where you want to be, right around $100,000. But you've given yourself and you've given the person you're negotiating with some hope that if that number isn't doable, there is still a number that could make an employment arrangement work and to allow you to move forward with your new job or your new promotion or your new role. That's where you want to land things. There's other ways to do it. There are ways to say, well, ideally, I would like to make $100,000 and just kind of leave it right there. Now, notice by throwing out that word ideally, that gives them a sense of your expectations. That creates that anchoring effect. But it also says, yeah, I'm willing to consider something that may not be perfectly ideal, but could be something off of that. It gives them hope that there is a deal to be had. You could also go something along the lines of, well, based on what I know, $100,000 seems reasonable for this role. And then again, notice you've based it on something that is a bit abstract, this idea of what you know. And notice they may probe a little bit. You want to be ready if they do to say, well, tell me what is it that you know that leads you to $100,000? You got to be ready to answer that question. But sometimes you may not roll with all of that information immediately. You may just throw out that phrase and see what happens. Another thing you might do is just throw it out there, and to do so almost informally. And sometimes you can point backwards in terms of kind of what you're making. Sometimes that's helpful, but that's a little bit more firm. But sometimes you can just do it informally looking forward and say, yeah, for my next move, I'd really like to be at $100,000 and literally just kind of toss it out there. You might say, well, what do you think about $100,000 as the salary? And force them to then respond to that number, not knowing exactly what your thought process is around it. And by doing that, that gives you an opportunity to test, but it also then sends a signal that that's kind of what's in your mind, but there's not too much commitment to it, that the person that you're negotiating with, whether it's HR or the hiring manager, it doesn't give them the sense that there's not any flexibility. And so you'll have to determine which strategy, which approach works best for you and what you're most comfortable delivering. But those are 3 or 4 different ideas in terms of how it is that you can throw a number out there. Now, notice what I didn't do, and here's what a lot of people want to do, is let's assume, for example, that you're making $75,000, you're applying for a new position, and you'd like to make $100,000. So here's what I see a lot of people do that I think is a mistake. And that is they are too anchored to their current salary or their past salary. And so what happens is that the idea of salary begins to come up, whether that's a question that is asked as part of an application or whether it's something that comes up in an interview. But too many times people are too anchored to their last salary as what should be the predictor of their future salary. And so there is kind of a straight line, if you will, there. It's very rare that you go from making $75,000 to making $275,000 in one move. Usually this is an incremental growth in terms of salary. But the mistake that I see people make is, let's assume that you're making $75,000 and you want to make $100,000. It's very difficult to achieve a 25% increase, especially if it's just a promotion or something like that, unless there is a significant new role that has massive new responsibilities that might warrant something like that. But what happens is if you lead with the 75,000, then that kind of anchors you towards your current salary. And you don't want to be anchored at your current salary. You want to be anchored at this aspirational salary. And so many times folks are quick to share what they're making, but I would encourage you to make sure that that is in your interest. I'm not saying to not do it. What I'm saying is make sure that is in your interest in terms of what you're trying to achieve. If you want 100, it's better to say and to use one of the techniques I just shared with you that gets that $100,000 number out there sooner rather than later. It's more difficult if you've already put that $75,000 number out there as your past salary or your current salary. And so, again, this is all about psychological anchoring. And the first number that goes on the table from you, that's going to be the number that has the most impact. And so I want to encourage you to think about that number being your aspirational salary as opposed to the past or current salary. So as we think back about this entire moment here that we're trying to manage more strategically, we know that our strategy is ask for more. And that strategy is really built off of a lot of evidence that says that the people that ask for more tend to be rewarded for their ambition. And this is true in salary negotiation, but it's true in a lot of other things as well. The folks that are willing to ask for more tend to get it. Now, more may not mean the number that you ask for. What it may mean, though, is that you go to the higher side of the salary range as opposed to the lower side. But if you want to get to the higher side, it's best to ask for more. That's going to position the negotiation. That's going to drive the conversation to the higher end of that salary range. And so really, it's quite simple, but it is difficult to do. And what I would encourage you to do if you're having trouble with this is I would encourage you to talk to someone about it beforehand. Because what will happen is if you talk to someone and say, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm making now, here's the job I'm going for, here's what I think I should make in this particular role or what I would like to make in this particular role. I think there's some rationale for it. It's not totally ridiculous. What do you think? The more people that you talk to that says, that seems reasonable to me, or if I were you, I'd go for it, or yeah, I know a little bit about this and you may be a little high, but that's at least legitimate in terms of an opening demand on your part. The more that you hear that from people, the more confidence you will have. And the more confidence you have, the more willing you will be to be bold in this negotiation. And so what I find is one of the best ways to deal with that self-doubt, to deal with that voice in our head that says, that's too much, we need to be more reasonable, is to test it. And to test it with people that you trust, test it with people that may have a little knowledge in this, and to make sure that you are being reasonable. And then with that affirmation and with the confidence that comes from that, you can go into this negotiation with the purpose of delivering the salary number that you are looking to achieve. So, secret number 2, ask for more. And I think you'll find that you get rewarded for it. I hope this episode on secret number 2, where we talked about asking for more, gives you a sense of confidence for your next salary negotiation. These moments require courage. They require you to be bold. And if you have a plan and you have a technique and you know how to do it and you know that it's okay if they say no, that you can still put together an outstanding deal that will work for you and work for the company, that you can take that plan and go achieve the salary that you want. But remember, these 2 secrets work together. Secret number 1 about the process beginning before the process begins, you've got to remember that because you've got to set up the value to be able to support asking for more. And then you've got to find the right time. And that was really a big part of secret number 1, is to make sure that you ask for more at the right time. And here's the reason why. It's something that my colleague shared with me one time that I thought was so incredibly brilliant. And that is the right answer at the wrong time will become the wrong answer. And so if you want your salary aspiration to be the right answer, it's important that you ask for more at the right time, and you will increase the chances that that becomes the right answer, and that becomes your new salary. Thank you for listening to Negotiation Made Simple. Thank you for being part of this 3-part series on salary negotiation. We've done the first 2 secrets, and the 3rd secret is to come. But before we get there, I'm answering your questions about salary negotiation in our mini episodes, The Negotiation Navigator. And so I hope that you will tune in as I answer those questions. And I hope that you will also be willing to ask questions as well by sending those to admin@lowrygroup.net. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.